most cops, as far as I'm concerned, any officer worth his or her salt will tell you that they want to catch the bad guy in the process. Going to for instance, if a burglar comes to your house and breaks in and steals your computer and your valuables and everything like that, of course you call the cops, and the officer comes to the door, it really is frustrating for them to take the report, gather the evidence after the fact. Officers would much rather be proactive rather than reactive. And so I want to be proactive in the pursuit of the smoking gun, if you will.
Exactly.
And so you would say, well, what do you mean by being proactive? I'm saying that I think the way to go approach this problem is to get whoever, whether it's ET or a government, and I don't believe that. I think it is extraterrestrial beings that are coming here, and getting them to come to a place of our choosing at a time of our choosing, so that we can have the proper equipment to document it. And that would be proactive. In other words, you would get them to come to you. And I have a number of ideas on how to go about doing that. At this stage of the game, I'd prefer to talk in generalities, only from the standpoint is I don't want anybody stealing my idea and doing it without me being there. Okay. I want to be in on the arrest. I want to put handcuffs on one of the little grays, if you will.
One of the little grays, huh?
Yeah.
Got some small handcuffs.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to voluntarily do that before one of our Earth governments make an actual disclosure? Or do you think, in what order do you think that might happen?
I don't think that any of the governments are going to make disclosure unless they're absolutely positively forced into it. The proverbial saucer landing on the White House lawn, like the day the Earth stood still. Sure, then disclosure would be forthcoming, and then I think it would be very limited and very controlled. At the same time, I don't get the impression that ET really cares one way or another that we know that they're here, that they're coming here. If that were the case, they wouldn't allow themselves, I don't think, to be photographed or be able to be documented with scientific equipment.
Well, they know we do. They know that we know the information about them. They just don't care.
Exactly. I mean, hey,
they just really don't care what we think about them.
If you believe the crash of a flying disc in Roswell is real, and I do, okay, then they know that we know. We've got one of their damn craft, okay, and probably a couple of the pilots.
Even thousands of years, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's all kinds of speculation as to, the government's working in conjunction with ET, and I don't know. I personally don't have any facts to indicate that they are. But at the same time, it would stand to reason that, hey, I just look, whenever we lose an exotic airplane, I'll give you a case in point. We lost an exotic tail section of a helicopter when they went in and took out bin Laden in Pakistan.
Exactly.
And the U.S. government jumped through all kinds of hoops to get that tail section of that helicopter back. So I wouldn't necessarily think that they wouldn't have tried to do that with wreckage from the Roswell, that they made contact with certain emissaries from our government. Eisenhower went missing for 5 days, 7 days?
Yes, he did. Yes,
and supposedly he was having a dental work done. I don't know. I mean, so I wouldn't put it past that some kind of liaison had been set up, and that there may be some kind of constituents that they're able to work back and forth. Hey, we'll tell you how to turn the on switch on a piece of equipment if we can have that piece of equipment back. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
That's right. We sure like to have some feedback, comments from our listeners. You're welcome to call anytime at 888-919-2355. That's 888-919-2355 right here at Epic Voyages on Inception Radio with Ken Storch. and we're talking about all this wonderful information regarding flying saucers and ETs and landings and controversies. And Ken, if a disclosure is made, it's probably going to be between, what would you say, the U.S., France, or Russia, that has some pretty incredible investigative information. Which country do you think would possibly make the disclosure first if it came down to it?
Well, as much as I would hate to say it, I think it'll come through the UN. And I'm not a big proponent of the United Nations, but I think that whatever country, whether it's Russia, China, ourselves, or Brazil, or Mexico, whatever, that is able to obtain the smoking gun, okay, the hard, concrete, undeniable, in-your-face proof that would put the skeptics at the back of the line, I think would probably be released through the United Nations. There is some really excellent people that are working in ufology through the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. One of them is a state director, Lorna Hunter, up in Minnesota, South Dakota, and I think she's the state director for Hawaii. And
Hawaii,
yeah, and this lady really does an excellent job of sifting through tons of paperwork and reports. And keep in mind, most of not a lot of the reports that come in are just fabrications or misidentifications. Probably 98% of them. But that 2% that comes in is really the cream of the crop, if you will, and that's the 2% that I think most people are interested in. And I think that it's going to be people like Lorna, maybe not necessarily her, but certainly researchers, investigators out in the field are going to come across that smoking gun, and whether it's in China or Russia or, like I said, Mexico or Brazil, that's one of the reasons why I prefer to be going proactive instead of reactive. I think
exactly.
Yeah, I think there's a way to get ET to respond to us at a time and place of our choosing. I really do. I think they're, you think outside the box. They're not infallible, and I hear people say this all the time. Well, their technology may be beyond our ability to duplicate, but if you can dream it, you can build it.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
I think we're only limited by our imagination. And so they're not infallible. They made mistakes. They crashed 2 of them in Roswell that we know about. There's probably other crashes around the world. But
Louisville, Kentucky.
Absolutely.
There was a big crash in Louisville, Kentucky with a couple of Air National Guard guys in jets chasing them.
I would like to know what went down in Pennsylvania, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1966. Oh, yeah. I would love to know what that object was. Shag Harbor up in Nova Scotia. I would like to know what the hell that was that came down in the ocean.
Exactly. You better believe it. You mentioned Hawaii a while ago. I had the pleasure of visiting with Lorna just very, very briefly at one of the UFO conferences earlier this year. And you mentioned Hawaii. You were saying hello to some friends or family a while ago when we opened. I have to, let me take the privilege here about 10 seconds. I want to say hello to my sister, Carol, from Hawaii. I have not seen that sweet, sweet girl in 20 years. And I'm going to see her for the first time in 20 years this Sunday in Oklahoma City. She and her husband, Joe Williams, flew in from Hawaii, and they're visiting some of the family here. But I just want to say hi, Carol. I know you're listening down in Dallas, and we'll see you Sunday. But she's from Hawaii, and that's what keyed me. Lorna is quite a lady, a lady. I met her earlier this year.
Hey, Roger.
What island?
Roger.
Kauai.
Oh, right
yes.
on my.
I don't mean to break in, but Daniel says to check your Skype for all of our questions that are coming in for the show.
Okay, got some coming in now? Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to open up your chat and see all the questions Daniel's feeding you. If not, I can relay them, but you should.
Go ahead and relay them because they're not coming through.
Okay. Let me start off with the last one.
We've got some questions for Ken, and unfortunately, we haven't been getting them. The questions coming through on my Skype right here on the computer. Let's see what they are.
Do you have access to them, or you want me to read them off now?
Yeah, go ahead
okay.
and read them.
The first one, it says, we all know that disclosure has been made to a few. We all know there is a hidden government that doesn't account for anything. Why waste time looking for more proof when laws are being broken and the people harmed from secret groups?
Ken?
Yeah, I think that it's our DNA that requires us to seek the truth no matter what. Governments come and go, and governments will, and if you look at the historical data, are unquestionably repressive. They will try to keep the truth from ever surfacing, no matter what it is, whether it's genocide, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's an illegal war. They will always try to repress it, but ultimately the truth comes to the top. And the reason why is because people will not let it die, that they will keep asking questions, and they want to know unequivocally what the truth is. And
exactly.
And what better way to peel back the onion layers and expose a shadow government, if you believe that, than through disclosure? I mean, what better way to keep forcing it? And sooner or later that door, there's been a number of cracks, and sooner or later that door is going to swing open.
Exactly. We have another question
sure.
or comment?
Did Ken start researching UFOs while he was still in the service openly? And if so, did that affect him in any way?
I started reading and researching UFOs after that incident in the Air Force, and no, I didn't do it openly. It was more of a clandestine, and I really didn't come out of the closet. I've been studying them for about 35 years, but I didn't come out of the closet even when I was in law enforcement until about 1993, 94. People that I work with didn't know that on my days off and my off time, except one or two very close personal friends knew that I was disappearing and going investigating flying saucer reports. And if I may, just wanted to tell you a real quick war story. I was given a deposition in a federal case. It was in front of Judge Maish. Now, I don't know if you know who Judge Maish is, but he's the one that presided over Timothy, over the Oklahoma City
McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh case. It had nothing to do with Timothy McVeigh. But it was a federal case, and the attorney knew that I would investigate or was investigating flying saucers. So in order to discredit my testimony, he brought that up, and he said, "Isn't it true, Officer Storch, that on your off days you go around chasing flying saucers?" And I said, "No, I don't." Well, I had already done several documentaries, and people knew that I was investigating flying saucers. And the presiding judge, he kind of looked at me and said, "Officer, you're aware of the penalty of perjury, and you can multiply that by 10 in my court." And I remember looking back at the judge and said, "Your Honor," I said, "some of those objects have been clocked at 3,000 plus miles an hour, and if I was capable of chasing them, I wouldn't be sitting here in the chair giving a deposition. But I do go and investigate them." I come to find out, there's more to the story than that, but I found out later that this particular attorney had 26 questions concerning flying saucers in which he was going to discredit me. But after that first encounter, that first question, he didn't ask any more. But, yeah, to answer the question more specifically, I did research it when I was in the military, and I did it ultimately as a law enforcement officer. But, like I said, I didn't really come out of the closet until about 1993.
Okay.
And another one, how does Ken explain these creatures being bipedal if they are truly extraterrestrial?
I don't have an answer to that question other than the fact that, you look at how we've developed, and being bipedal and having a thumb and 4 digits to be able to grasp and make things, I think is indication that, but I wouldn't say that all life forms out in the universe would mimic or emulate us. I think that some of the life forms that we encounter are bipedal, simply because I think it's one of the most easiest ways to get around, especially when you encounter like stairs and hills and seats and getting up from a table and everything. I think that the human form is probably pretty close to perfection in that regard, and that's my opinion anyway.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the ETs that have been not photographed, rather, but artist conception, very reliable artist conception. Some have had 3 fingers, some have had 4 fingers. There are some that's kind of a Norwegian effect. They look very much like humans, except they have ice blue eyes. They look just exactly like us. 4 fingers and a thumb, and then others have 3 or 4 distended fingers, like the Greys.
And then there's, if you go by any of the abduction reports, there's a reptilian race.
The reptilians, right.
That is apparently coming here. And, excuse me, I think that, I suspect that there are intelligent life forms out there that may be nothing but pure energy, that
Exactly.
they don't need a shell like a human, other than the electromagnetic energy that they contain within.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my imagination, thinking that just because life forms on this planet are bipedal doesn't necessarily mean that and the extent and the vastness of the universe that all life forms will emulate us or bipedal, right, or whatever. Yeah.
We're visiting with Ken Storch on Epic Voyages. The number to call is 888-919-2355 for our listeners listening worldwide. 888-919-2355. Give us a call, and Ken will be glad to address any questions or comments that you have. And back to the studios. Let's see. Do we have some more questions coming in yet?
Yeah. One, it's just not sure if it's been addressed, but whatever happened to the targets that were coming over that caused DEFCON 5 to almost go into action? Were they tracked over the U.S.? What happened to them?
They were tracked all across the United States. They went up through, as I recall, up over South Dakota into Canada, and then across Canada into the Bering Sea, and then ultimately went into the Soviet Union. And that's when Nixon got on the Kremlin phone and called Brezhnev and said, "Hey, they're not ours." As I stated, the Russians were monitoring our strategic nuclear forces, and they knew that our SAC bombers were being scrambled to go to their fail-safe points. And by the way, I just within the last 2 years ran across a senior master sergeant retired from the United States Air Force that was stationed down in Barksdale, Louisiana, and he contacted me. I'd given a talk about the incident. And he contacted me and he said, "Ken," he said, "I was a senior master sergeant in charge of loading nuclear weapons onto the B-52 air wing that was stationed at Barksdale, Louisiana in 1973." And he said, "Until you told your story," he said, and once again, Roger, this is an example of compartmental, it's not going to roll off my tongue now.
Compartmentalization.
There you go. Easy for you to say.
Hey, and I've got laryngitis.
But yeah, he said, "Hey, all we knew was that we were scrambled," and he said we loaded nuclear weapons onto these B-52 bombers, and they took off from Barksdale. And he said, "We never knew why." He says, "We knew it wasn't a drill because they were live, locked, and loaded nuclear weapons." But here's an example of somebody being at the other end of the communication system, not knowing what it is they're doing, but just following orders, if you will, and
Exactly.
putting nuclear weapons on the B-52s and watching them take off and go to their fail-safe points. And that occurred in October of 1973. He was very adamant about the date. Said it was the only time in his 26 years that they went live with nuclear weapons on B-52s, the whole air wing.
That's scary.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
scary.
it really is.
I think the caller was kind of curious also that what happened with those craft when they left our territory and was headed back toward Russia or back over Russian airspace. What would the Russians have done when they entered their airspace? What do you suppose ever happened there?
I have no idea.
Would they have been more aggressive and do a shoot down or attempt to shoot down or not?
Well, if you believe some of the Air Force reports and some of the research, Stanton Friedman has a book out. It's called "Shoot Them Down," and I think there's like a dozen incidences within the American airspace in which they actually opened fired on unidentified flying objects. I'm sure the Russians would have been just as aggressive in trying to either bring one of them down or at least to keep them away from their airspace. I can't imagine them not. But hey, in 1973, the sophistication of weaponry is nowhere near as what it is today. The Russians were still primarily relying on technology of surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft batteries. Smart weapons that you see today, even though they may have been being tested, they certainly weren't online. And the Russians certainly didn't have them at that time either. So,
wonder what happened to those craft.
Well, you know what? I think you may have saw one when you were going back to college, Roger.
I saw one in 1973. I think
it was 1973.
I think it was one of those five. It was right down here about Keystone Dam when I was going back to Oklahoma State University one night about 2 a.m. I encountered a craft over there and never have forgotten it. That was my first time. But do we have some more callers coming in?
We have a caller right now calling in. Go ahead and take it.
Okay. Are you with us?
Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm calling from Puget Sound, Washington.
Puget Sound, okay.
Yeah. From what I understand, there's a lot of UFOs in right now. One of the hot spots is Turkey, which is sort of an obscure nation. Most people probably haven't been there, and because of the location. But from people that I've been talking to, there are so many UFOs over there that it's even covered in the mainstream media. And that, there are so many UFOs there that people just accept it as just part of life. But since it's in the region that it's in, and it is I think it's a Muslim country, but they're peaceful. They're not radical or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's interesting is that there's so many UFOs there that a lot of them have been videotaped. And one of these videos was given to the Turkish government-sponsored Scientific and Technology Council, which is like part of the government. And they tried to debunk it, and they examined it over and over again. And couldn't find any evidence that it was a hoax, and there's been 3 or 4 other people. Anyways, I know we're getting low on time, but supposedly there's a hot spot there.
Ken, what information do you have on Turkey?
Well, there's a number of reports that have come out of Turkey, and I can't think of her name right off. Very attractive lady is a UFO researcher from Turkey. I was able to attend 2 of her lectures in Denver at one of the symposiums, and some really, really good, interesting cases involving the Turkish military. But that whole region is rife with China. There's a number of UFO reports that come out of China, Tibet. A lot of reports coming out of Tibet. A lot of reports coming out of the middle Iraq and Iran. So that whole region is I would classify as a hot spot. Absolutely, yeah. Turkey's got some good cases.
Well, yeah, Turkey has a history. They have a lot of ancient underground caverns there. That was on, if you watch Ancient Aliens, and part of their history. Like there's so many UFOs there that I know it's sort of an obscure nation, and most people probably don't go there for vacation. But from what I understand, if you go there, the chances are very good that you'll see something, because there's so many UFOs.
Well, isn't Mount Arafat? Isn't that in Turkey?
That's right.
Yeah, and isn't that? I think if I may be wrong on this, but I think the Sumerians referred to an alien race called the Anunnaki or the
Exactly.
Anunnaki, and weren't they supposedly from that region? They pointed to Mount Arafat as one of their bases or whatever. I think, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, if you go back when the first written record, the Sumerians, that region once again was a hot spot, if you will.
Okay, we want to thank the caller. We have another call coming in.
No, that's it for now.
That's it. Well, Ken, you were talking about Mount Arafat. Of course, they've located the Ark of, not the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark. Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
And so much spins around that area of the country, and the Mount Arafat, and sometimes being referred to as the Mountain of God, and the Ark is there, and so much activity of this nature taking place. I wonder what the tie-in is between the biblical record and the Ark and the Sumerians and the Ark of the Covenant and even the UFO phenomenon in that area, because it's all so heavy right there.
Roger, I think there is a direct correlation between religion and flying saucers.
Right.
And if you just look at the Christian Bible and forget all the other religions, and I don't mean that facetiously, but if you just take the Christian version and go back in the biblical data, there is hundreds of references to E.T. I mean, Ezekiel and the wheel in the sky. What was the light that the three wise men followed in the desert? What was the light that led the Israelis out into the desert for 40 years? I mean, if you get into the religious component of it, all religions pretty much have the same theme. I mean, if you look at Muhammad, the prophet, with Islam, they talk about the Great Flood. They talk about God coming down and talking to the prophets and interacting with the prophets. And this is, once again, I mean, I don't want to tread on anybody's spiritual beliefs. I'm sure that's not my intent. But I certainly believe that when disclosure comes and we finally look at the bare facts and the truth, we're going to find out that religion plays a very important part in the ET makeup of this whole problem. There's a lot
of very close interrelation there. Has been for centuries and eons.
Well, and I think that religion is one of the reasons why our government is reluctant to fill in some of the gaps. I think they have a piece of the puzzle, and I think because of the powerful religious implications in the belief system of people that, and rightly so, I think it's a consideration that responsible leaders have to take in. Hey, if we throw this out on the table and let people digest it, the first question is, A, are they going to be able to accept it and digest it, and how's it going to impact their personal belief system? And how is that going to interact with the social fabric of our nation, more importantly, the world?
Our entire planet. The social fabric, the major religions, government, economics, military, the general confidence of the population of the earth in their governments to protect them. And Ken, this has just been fascinating. I want us to come back and do this again sometime real soon and have you back, because we've got so much more information that we would like to extract from you and for you to share with us. We are out of time, folks. It's just a hair past 9:30. I'm Roger Peacock. You're listening to Inception Radio Network, and this has been Epic Voyages. And this has been an epic evening, especially for me. We're so glad Ken Storch has been here with us. He'll be back again. We will see you again soon. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic Voyagers. Good evening.